Je pense sans cesse à toi.
Hey, and welcome to The Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot button topics in food and beverage. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. In episode 27, we will dig deep into the science of agriculture. We will be talking CRISPR, the endangered foods, and seed banks. Here in the studios of OPB, I am joined by Virginia Gewin, a journalist covering food security and crop diversity for publications such as Nature, Science, and Modern Farmer. Hi, Virginia.
Hi, Catherine.
And Tove Danovich, a journalist covering food and sustainability for publications such as Eater, Bon Appétit, The Atlantic, Fast Company, and NPR. Welcome, Tove.
Thanks. Hello.
And Heather Arndt Anderson, food historian, botanist, and author. Hello.
Hi, Catherine.
Now for our first topic. As the debate over GMOs rages on, we've been hearing about an innovation called CRISPR that could make genetic modification of our foods less controversial. Tove, I know you have covered GMOs extensively, so maybe you can start us off. What exactly is CRISPR?
So to start off, I feel like we have to talk about the fact that GMOs really aren't a very good definition of anything. It simply means something was genetically modified. So what we think of when we're talking about GMOs is a transgenic crop, which means that a gene from one plant has been, or animal or bacteria, has been inserted into something in order to change it. So BT corn is one of the really popular ones. A little bacteria that has insecticidal properties was inserted from a different little bacteria into this corn, and it allows it to keep things from killing it more easily. So CRISPR, what's different about it is that it goes in and it allows scientists to basically look at the DNA that exists already there. And then they can say, we don't like this little part. Let's go in and snip this right out. So they're not effectively changing the overall structure. They're working with what's already in there. So you could say that CRISPR is just as much of a genetically modified organism as these transgenic crops, but it's a little bit different. And that makes some people that get nervous about, crops that have fish genes or something else rest a little bit more easily, because it seems a little bit closer to just normal breeding and other things that, humans have been doing to plants and animals for hundreds and hundreds of millions of years.
So, yeah, it's not frankenfoods. I feel like I hear that term a lot.
Yeah.
We never use that term. So, Tove, is it kind of like gene therapy, but for crops? From my limited understanding, it's just looking at the genome or the overall genetic information in an organism and then taking out the parts that are harmful, either to a human, disease-causing genes, or in the case of plants, maybe a resistance to a pest or...
Yeah, exactly. Definitely like that. I know one of the things that gets brought up all the time is mushrooms that don't turn brown, which doesn't really seem a lot like a disease, but that attribute is somewhere in the DNA code. So they're hoping that they can go in and just take it out and then no more brown mushrooms.
You can really see how it could help the human race, and also it could be very scary in terms of altering the way humans are.
It's into Gattaca territory, doesn't it? Not that I wouldn't mind a world populated with Jude Laws and Uma Thurmans.
Yeah.
But, we want to, that's a very, slippery slope.
But if it's going to keep our food from going bad or keep it from coming down with diseases, it could save a lot of lives, couldn't it, Virginia?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think there's a role for CRISPR, most definitely, in crop production, especially at a food security level. I mean, everything that GMOs were trying to do, gene editing makes it much easier. It just is a more straightforward, faster, more clean technology just to achieve the same goal. And the goal is always just to create new crop varieties that maintain high yields and are disease resistant, drought tolerant. I mean, this is a constant. Plant breeding is a constant. It always will take place. It always has taken place. It's something where we are trying to keep making new plants that are able to thrive in current conditions. And that is always going to be And I think CRISPR's there's a role for it to play. And it's something that the biggest issue is time. When you think of conventional breeding, it takes 10 years to come up with a new variety of a crop. And that is time we don't have anymore. I mean, we just don't. And so if you can shrink that to 2 years and get a new variety out that's resistant to a pest that's devastating huge swaths of really productive farmland, do it.
But, okay, I remember with GMOs, there was the issue that big corporations like Monsanto were controlling the GMO, I guess, seed population. But now I'm understanding that they are also investing in CRISPR, DuPont and Monsanto. Does anyone know anything about that?
Of course they're going to go there. That's, it's easier, it's more cost effective for them to go that route. And there's two different issues, I think, and this is where the concerns with GMOs get conflated. There is technology, which gets demonized, and there is use of technology by corporations. And those are two completely different things. And so going forward, I would love somehow for the food community broadly to have a conversation that really disentangles those, because they're two completely different things. And we can't continue to demonize technology when we need it. But we also have to be mindful and keep a watchful eye on how corporations are controlling genes and crops and access.
Hear, hear. Yeah, I think that one of the big problems that the general population has with the entanglement of corporation and food technology is the story of the farmer who can't collect his own plant's seed and then grow his own seed because of a contract that he or she has with the big bad corporations. And I wonder sometimes, if the goal is noble, the goal being ending hunger or maintaining a food source for the entire global population, how bad is that really? But I also am not that afraid of science.
And it also doesn't seem like that's something that won't happen with CRISPR, too, because there is a difference between editing where it's just in that one thing that's been edited and then also editing the genes that get passed down throughout, the generation. So you could either way, I guess, just not allow farmers to collect the seed. But if you were doing it every single time and making this a sterile seed, then it's the same thing as GMOs, really, at least in terms of that.
Oh, yeah, making it a sterile seed so people have to keep purchasing it.
Well, that's what they've always done. But the big deal is, there's so many sides to this. There's the R&D, so you have to recoup your money if you're going to put all of this effort and energy into it. And that's what the companies say. We have to have a way to do this. But for the most part, the family farmers, they just want to be able to maintain their plots on their land. And they are not – it's two different worlds as far as what benefit is happening on to either end of the spectrum. And so – I think what I worry about is that there's not even a place for the discussion of how some of these changes that need to be made could be made in a way that would benefit, say, organic farmers. I mean, there are huge, our whole entire citrus industry in Florida is being devastated by a disease. There are organic farmers just falling left and right out of Florida. They can't keep up. They can't produce anymore. If you could make one change to a gene to allow these farmers to continue organic practices and maintain their crops, I don't see how that's we have to find a way to enable that piece of this whole puzzle to come to fruition. If we don't, I just don't understand what the point of being organic was in the first place. It seems like the whole organic community lost its way when they started to just fight GMOs and just fight technology, when the whole premise of being organic is to build soil and to decrease chemical usage and to have all of these really harmonious with nature kind of attributes. And if we can't figure out a way to use technology to get to a place where organic farmers' lives can be easier, I just feel like we're in a really bad place.
I totally agree. And I a moment ago when you're speaking about what's happening to citrus farmers, I thought of that BT corn again, which was created ostensibly to prevent the need for spray because the BT, the bacterium that's what the B stands for, bacterium thuringiensis, is that's what it is, that would make the corn poisonous to its pests. Conversely, Roundup Ready corn or Roundup Ready crops are made to withstand pesticides or herbicides so that you can do a broad brush spray. So I see how people in the organic farming community could see those two products as equally bad. But I think one had the goal of eliminating the need for spray, whereas the other one is more of a, like, let's make it so that you can spray everything. And so I think that the organic community would be really better off embracing some of these technologies instead of fearing them outright.
Well, I know that there are conversations happening within the organic community that are trying to be more along the lines of what are we for instead of what are we against?
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge leap forward. And I really want to see that, conversation get catalyzed a bit more because I feel like we're really in uncharted territory as far as changing climate, changing conditions. I mean, already you're starting to see crop yields dropping for wheat and corn and rice, and these are not easy fixes. These are this is where all the money and effort has gone into making these high yielding crops, and they're still already flattening off, and so or dropping even. And so, if we don't have a way to really think through, okay, could this technology be used in the most positive way to benefit the most people, then, we're in really crazy places. Anyway, you can just get off my high horse.
I think that's where going back to the naming issue is really important, because if we keep talking about GMOs as this thing, and especially this really scary thing that, anyone into organic or into natural food should be frightened of and very much against, it doesn't allow for different applications of technology. And, even the BT versus Roundup Ready are such completely different technologies. It's crazy that they would be under the same umbrella. And I hope that this CRISPR discussion kind of doesn't just fall through, people talk about CRISPR as a GMO loophole all the time. But maybe it'll actually lead to a discussion about this is not a loophole. It's actually just as much of a different technology as all the other ones we've been using for the past decades.
And CRISPR sounds like the place where you keep your vegetables. I know. So it's already off to a good start.
Well, I was going to say thank you for bringing up naming, Tove, because does anyone remember what the letters CRISPR stand for? I've already forgotten, and I feel like we should.
I know.
Oh, thank you, Tove.
Clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, which is really rolls off the tongue. Yeah. The unfortunate thing about that is to even understand what that means, I feel like you need a whole DNA what is it lesson, which of course is super simple. So maybe later on.
I spent 2 years working in the molecular botany lab at Portland State University, and I still couldn't tell you what all of those words are.
I like just the place where you store your vegetables in the fridge. Yes. That's good, Heather. Thank you. Well, let's move on to our next topic. We have all heard the horror stories about people eating endangered animals like gorillas, manatees, and elephants. But most of us enlightened foodies don't realize that we actually consume imperiled species every day. Virginia Gewin, you have written about the surprising fact that bananas are endangered. Can you tell us why this ubiquitous food might be disappearing from supermarkets?
Oh, the banana. So when you think about foods, like we were just discussing in the previous segment, there are several crops that face some real challenges, and they range anywhere from disease, which is the big one facing the banana, to, water issues. Water usage is a big one for several crops. Within the next couple decades, we could say goodbye to large areas of land that can no longer support avocados or chickpeas. Water is going to be increasingly difficult for farmers to get access to. And avocados use 9 gallons of water per ounce of avocado, and chickpeas use 76 gallons of water for every ounce of chickpeas produced. So those two crops have, droughts and high temperatures are going to cause a lot of problems for areas, especially in California, which is, our country's vegetable basket. Basically, those are going to be areas that are going to really struggle. Heat, wild coffee beans could be gone by 2080. There are also concerns that cacao could be gone by 2050. So coffee and chocolate are facing some struggles. Just unstable growing conditions. Peanuts and maple syrup. Peanuts need nice hot conditions all the time. Maple syrup needs nice cool conditions all the time. And you can start to lose vast acreages of land that can support continued productions of those. But to get back to the banana, disease is clearly the big issue for crops in the near term, most definitely. And if there was ever a poster child for the use of CRISPR, it is the banana. The banana is, I have heard a lot of dire predictions over the last few years. And some people say that by some estimates, it could be gone in 5 years, 10 years. Nobody knows for sure. And when they say the banana could be gone, they mean the Cavendish. Yeah, and that is the one that we all eat. It is the one that is produced most widely throughout the world. And that is the problem. It's a monoculture. It is a clone. Every banana you have ever eaten is likely a Cavendish. And it's a clone. It's grown either by suckers or just clonally propagated in fields. And so it could not be more genetically identical. So if you have a disease...
Let me stop you. So you mean you're contrasting that with something that's grown from seed?
Yes.
Okay.
So most crops are grown from seed.
So are the little red bananas and plantains, which are still a staple in much of the developing countries, are those in just as much risk as our beloved Cavendish?
I don't think that those are as in much danger as the Cavendish. The Cavendish is clearly the one, and that is because it is the one that is the biggest, the zombie that's out there. And it's just, it's so much acreage, and it's just ripe conditions for a disease to come through and wreak havoc. So already in Asia, you can't produce Cavendish anymore. Wow. They are wiped out. And so the fear, and this is where there's the discrepancy of how long it's going to take before the Cavendish goes away, is if and when this new disease that's called Panama disease, this ubiquitous disease that's been around in bananas for a long time, but there's a new version of it called tropical race 4. If and when that gets to Central America and just blows through all of those monoculture stands, you'll never be able to grow Cavendish there again. And the whole reason that everybody loves Cavendish and it's grown is because it produces amazing huge bunches. They take a long time to ripen, so you can ship them all over the world. And it's those qualities that you need for mass production and for, getting them to everyone's breakfast table. But there's precedent for bananas going extinct, essentially, because the Gros Michel banana was the Cavendish before the Cavendish.
Suffered from terrible branding.
It is a horrible name.
Gros Michel?
Gros Michel.
How many young girls grew up?
I know. This is terrible.
Being teased.
But that variety was arguably better tasting than the Cavendish. But this Panama disease came through and wiped out, all of the plantations, and it's impossible to grow it because that disease stays in the soil for decades to come. So you can't grow that one again. And since bananas don't have seeds, it's very difficult to breed them. It's almost impossible. It takes so much time and effort because you have to work with the few mutants that do produce seeds, and then you have to cross them, and it's just a really arduous process. And so conventional breeding efforts are going to take forever. And so everyone looks to CRISPR and says, if there's a way to make this banana able to withstand this disease, why in the world would we not go that route? Mm-hmm. I mean, it would save an entire industry and huge. I mean, I don't even know the number of farmers that grow Cavendish bananas all over the world, but it's huge.
This is where I get kind of hung up in this argument is obviously it's really important to pay attention to things like climate change and increasing disease and all of that. But at the same time, the fight for the banana or the papaya and all this stuff is really an effort on the behalf of humans to have all the things we want all the time in exactly that way. And should we have that? Yes. Maybe having fewer bananas of a different kind is fine, and having a different kind of coffee that, isn't that fine, dark roast that's going extinct. But there are other varieties that we can choose from. So it's hard to know just how worried we need to be. This isn't a case of, every type of banana being wiped out of existence,
Right.
which even if that did happen, things like that have also happened before.
And it's not like the world is going to starve to death if Americans don't get their perfect yellow bananas. I'm going to say again, though, those red bananas are delicious. And they're small. They have a different kind of skin. They're totally different, but they're good. And maybe the world is ready to move on from bland, basic, like the non-fat milk of bananas.
The issue is that none of the other bananas that exist, and I agree, I like pretty much all other bananas more than Cavendish, but you can't ship them all over the world. They're going to bruise and be rotten by the time they get anywhere. So it's kind of thinking of it, and I agree. I think the more diversity that we can get in our food system, the better everyone is. But there are things like, shippability that you just, we bred for that for so long in other crops specifically. Tomatoes taking the biggest hit for taste, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're horrible. They're wretched, but they can go all over the world 20 times and be still fine. And so it's really trying to figure out that balance of the diversity of varieties, of tastes, of shippability, of, all of these things in this crazy web of food that we've now created, and trying to make sense of that I just, I think is going to be so complicated.
Do you think that our tastes and our demand for selection is influenced by the diversity that we have available, or do you think that the diversity that's produced is informed by our demand?
I think it was the former and is becoming more the latter.
I feel like we got entitled really quickly. My mom tells me stories. She grew up in Wisconsin about not having avocados or kiwis until she was in her 20s and went to San Francisco and, they had kiwis there. And that was not very long ago. And now they're in everything. Subway has avocados. They've taken over the world. And just in the last, 30, 40 years, we've kind of decided we should have all the tropical fruits all the time and all of these tomatoes all the time. And I feel like maybe we could get used to the other thing in a couple decades, too, if we had to.
But this is kind of good. Do you think that our need for novelty can save plants? Because that could really drive diversity if we're ready to move on from Red Delicious and Cavendish and onto weird, nubby, crunchy, ligneous varieties of things. Maybe we'd all be better off.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Tove and Virginia, I feel like also both of you are kind of talking along the same theme, which is that humans want to have their cake and eat it too, whether it's always being able to have tropical fruit in the winter or always being able to farm the way they want to. And now I'm gonna kind of backtrack a little bit because I was thinking about what you were speaking about earlier about organic farmers being against genetic modifications. And I can see why, actually, now that I'm sort of working through this in my mind, because what they want to do is to be able to continue to farm in monocultures. And they want to be able to change the banana so that it's not even susceptible to disease. But the whole idea of a monoculture is such an anathema to the idea of having this beautiful organic farm that's a polyculture with, a buffer zone for insects and everything else. It seems like we just need this huge philosophical shift. We need to shift, as Heather's saying, toward just a desire for more diversity and more kind of interest in our food. And we need to be able to sort of wrap our minds around the idea of farming differently. I just don't see us getting there. I wish we could.
I think what it is we need to have room and space for all different kinds of farms and for all different kinds of farming, realizing that we're kind of in this place where we have, I hate to say we have to have monocultures but we have to have high yielding farms. And that typically is monoculture for all of the bad points of that. I would love to see more diversification of land use, of farming in general, of varieties being farmed. I mean, even just subtle variations in varieties would do huge amounts of good for soil building, for insect resistance, for pest resistance, all of those things. And so I feel like if the thing that heartens me is this resurgence of ancient grains or of all of these different things, instead of being kind of white bread and rice and all of that, we're really starting to want and demand as consumers more different things. Than I think demand really and our personal tastes and this interest in food can be a power for change for good in a way that can make food systems just, more diverse food systems that are more sustainable in the long term. And I don't think that that's going to get rid of monoculture, unfortunately, because that would be ideal. But I just don't really think that that's feasible.
No, you can't feed the world on 10 different varieties of heirloom melon, even though they're beautiful to look at. And it's a really great thing for us wealthy developed nations to have access to. You need to be able to grow rice and wheat and corn in large swaths.
Unless we CRISPR ourselves and make it so we don't need as much food.
Oh, now you're cooking with gas.
No, CRISPR ourselves.
That's the solution. I thought it was more diversity, but maybe it's just less diversity of
Just need to
automatons.
eat less. It's fine.
Well, now for topic number 3. This past May, there was a news flash that had many of us scratching our heads. On a remote Norwegian island in the Arctic Circle, a layer of permafrost protecting something called the global seed vault melted due to global warming, and everyone freaked out. But a lot of us asked, what is the global seed vault? I have been wondering about this, and today is my chance to ask you all, since you're all experts in this world. Heather Arndt Anderson, you're a resident botanist, so I'll turn to you first. What is a seed vault?
Well, the global seed vault is in or just outside the town of Longyearbyen in Svalbard, Norway. It's 700 miles from the North Pole. And it's this little archipelago that's just populated with reindeer and Vikings and polar bears. And it turns out Norwegians are really great at digging tunnels. And so they dug this giant tunnel that looks like the wall from Game of Thrones out of the side of this glacier. And they've stored something like 14 million different specimens of germplasm or seeds from around the world, every country in the world. And it was started not that long ago, but so they did have a little bit of melting. It refroze. They did chip it away, but they have all of the seeds stored at, I believe, like minus 17 Celsius. It's like hella cold in there. I don't think the seeds are going to be.
None of the seeds were lost.
No,
Okay,
they were
so,
buried deep in the tunnel. It was just the front door that was a little bit defrosted. It's really interesting because I had misunderstood the purpose of the seed vault. I thought it was just, we're going to store them all just in case of the doomsday. And one of the founders, Corey Fowler, hates that name, the Doomsday Vault, because that's not what it's for. He wants people to be able to make withdrawals from this bank. And botanists or horticulturists in Aleppo did just that when some of their samples were destroyed during the current conflict. They were able to make a withdrawal to regrow some of those seeds. And then they can collect the seed from those plants that grow and replace their deposit back in the vault. And other seed banks and seed vaults around the world, like there's one in Hawaii that's doing the same thing. They keep growing the seeds to keep not just heterogeneity alive, but to keep a fresh source of seed in these places. So it's not just these old samples wasting away.
So basically, let me try an analogy. The Svalbard Doomsday Vault, as it's known, is kind of the rock star, right? Mm-hmm. It's the global rock star, the flashy one that gets all the press. But it doesn't really do that much. No. I mean, it really is just this kind of backup system that was never meant to be. I mean, it was a surprise that they would have to open up the seed vault that early when the Aleppo gene bank failed. And that was a very dramatic story, and it also garnered a lot of press attention. But it never was supposed to be opened already or needed this early. It just was, one of those instances where they had backed up their system. They could go back. They could get their seeds out. The rest of the 1,700 gene banks or seed banks around the world are the more like hard scrabble rock bands around the country that never stop touring and do all the work and keep rock alive. But in this case, it would be keeping the seeds alive. You know, they are the ones that consistently grow out the seeds to keep them viable. They share between countries to make sure that we have this constant movement of seeds, and it's called germplasm, but that's just really this bizarre name for the material, that you know, the seed and all of the genes that are inside of the seed, just to keep that moving around the world so that plant breeders who need a certain disease resistance trait can look for it in, you know, that they need that in you know, the Philippines, they can look for it in seeds that are kept in Fort Collins, Colorado. And so it's really what I kind of feel bad about. And I always try to give a shout out to the gene bank managers around the world who are the rock star, like the real rock stars that don't get any press, but are working under very difficult conditions with no money, with no attention, with, I mean, really just no infrastructure almost. And they are the ones that are collecting the seed in their local areas and keeping these seeds alive and maintaining this diversity in a way that we don't ever appreciate fully. So shout out.
And we know you're a groupie, Virginia, because a couple of episodes ago you admitted that on your family vacation to Hawaii, you went and spent the afternoon in a seed bank.
And I love them.
I would like to add, as a wine person, that there is another type of bank for plants. We were talking before about bananas that are not grown from seed. Same thing with grapevines. They're called vine libraries. Similar idea where they grow heritage grapevines. They just have vineyards set aside where they just keep these very ancient varieties alive. And if they need to take cuttings for whatever reason, they're there. And some of the best and oldest are in the Republic of Georgia, and those have definitely been endangered from time to time by strife. And same thing. They're just these really determined, passionate botanists out there who are just keeping these things alive. It's so
we
cool.
do that with apple trees too in the Willamette Valley and on Salvie Island. We have these living, they're orchards, but they're heirloom orchards to keep grafting materials available for cider makers and for apple nerds like myself, pomophiles. It's great. Whenever you can find places like that, I think it's a good. And your time will never be wasted walking around a weird knobby little old orchard.
Yeah, I also love that we have seed libraries, too. I feel like seed banks also get all the attention, like the Rockstar one. But it's so interesting that, you know, most cities, if not a lot of towns, too, will have some little place where, you know, you can go and check out some seeds for the planting season and then return them. And usually they're not sexy, you know, this is going to be extinct if you don't use it. But it's like, this is a flower someone in Portland or Milwaukee has been growing for 100 years. And, you know, grandma left it to the seed library. So now you can have it too.
So wait, how do you return them, Tove? You grow your own
collect
flowers?
them at the end of the growing season, which then requires, you know, you have to know how to collect seed. And I would not be a great candidate for that. I tried just growing something for seed and was like, this is not for me. I'm buying mine from the store.
I can only do that with poppies and sunflowers.
It's tough. Yeah, if you can throw them in the ground and they sprout, I'm great. But any more than that, it's difficult.
But the growth of that's been huge in the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, the number of seed libraries. And there was some controversy early on that I think some corporations kind of reared their heads and tried to shut down the ability to do that. And I think that pretty much died back.
They got enough low profile corporations.
They got enough bad press about that I think the seed libraries are safe for a while.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that was such a weird thing. I think it was that they were saying people might do, you know, bio attacks on these tiny seed libraries, and therefore they had to test every single seed to make sure it wasn't contaminated with something. It seems like there are higher things to hit for.
So it reminds me of like the big bad developers on the like those breakdancing movies or like the dance movies where like they're going to tear down the community center.
Getting back to the music metaphor.
Yes.
Well, I love how this is such a contrast to the CRISPR topic. I mean, it's very old school versus new school.
I think there's roles for both. I think that's the thing that I just find really disheartening is that it's not one or the other. There's a role to play for new technology, and there is a role to play for saving all of this amazing biodiversity and growing it and making our food systems more resilient. I don't see it as an either or.
Well, and we're talking about things at different scales. We've been talking about them at the molecular scale with the genes, and we're talking about them at the organismal scale with seeds. But we're also needing to have conversations about the ecological scale and maintaining habitats because, we can't really affect the habitat of a farm necessarily. Climate change is sort of a thing. It's happening. We can't really stop that. But, we can start working on policy to maintain some of the habitats because it's not just food plants that deserve our attention. This world we live in it's a vast web. It's a tapestry. And when you pull one thread, the whole thing can unravel. So we do need to kind of have our eyes open about this. And that's more where my expertise is on the ecological bigger picture scale of things. And that's a much more difficult conversation to have as our population continues to spiral out of control. She says optimistically.
In the same conversation as doomsday. Thank you, Heather. Well, I want to go off on a tangent because you mentioned Game of Thrones earlier, Heather. And that is, I was so excited. I hadn't really read too much in depth about this global seed vault. And when I figured out that the I guess it's an archipelago or a archipelago called Svalbard.
Yes.
That is the name of the place in the Golden Compass where
Yes,
the armored bears live. Do you all remember this?
Oh,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that or read it.
I was amazed when I found out it was a real place. I spent like 2 months in Norway and was like, wait a minute.
Are there real armored bears?
And
there?
there are real bears. I think it's one of those places where you legally have to be with someone with a gun because there are so many people that get attacked or killed by bears. I think a couple of years ago, like an English student was visiting and died because of a bear attack.
I was reading about that too on the Fresh Air interview with
with Carrie Fowler.
Yeah, Carrie Fowler.
The global sea vault.
Yeah, like he had to just do a 360 check before getting out of his car, before entering, because you do have to worry about a giant-ass bear stealthing up on you. They hide their noses, when they're in the snow. They know how to sneak. You think they're big, but no, they're stealthy. They will take you down.
Well, I love that because it just adds to kind of the mystique and
and that's why it's the rock star. It gets all the buzz.
But it makes seeds sexy.
It does, and that's why everyone wants to write about it.
They have their own bear force field, and everyone can say that.
They have the night watch standing guard on top.
Yeah, I love this. You guys, this has been such a fun conversation having you three experts here. But I think it's time for dessert. The moment where we each share something foodie or beveragey we have been enjoying this week. I am finally going to admit on this show that I have been on eBay collecting vintage Francoma pottery. Yes. I feel like every episode someone shares a dessert item that is something they've been looking for on eBay, and I'm finally going to share with the world. I'm not sure that this company still exists, but it was started by an artist named John Frank in 1933 using local clay sources in Oklahoma. Some of the pieces are really hokey, old Americana wagon wheels. Heather's nodding. You know what I'm talking
emphatically.
about?
No, I'm here for this. Keep talking.
And I think it might actually have lead in it, but as long as you don't microwave it or shatter it, suck on it. Anyway, there's some really cool pieces. It's really kind of organic looking and fun. The colors, Tove, I think you were talking about the color desert gold last time?
Harvest gold.
Harvest gold. Oh, well, I think they have a color called desert gold, but similar, and woodland moss. And anyway, so, but of course, the moment I started shopping for it, the price shot up. So, oh well. But anyway, check it out. It's kind of neat stuff.
Man.
Old Americana. How about you, Heather? What do you have for dessert?
Well, as I talk about once in a while, I come from German stock, and Oktoberfest is my favorite holiday, and it's just around the corner. And this year, I love it so much that I'm borrowing. My friend Nora worked at the Rhinelander. It's this, it was a 60-something-year-old German restaurant in Portland, Oregon. It just closed or got torn down. But she worked there in high school, and I have her dirndl. And so I'm going to wear her dirndl and my big gray wool Wien Stefana wizard hat, and I have a strap-on drinking horn with a holster. And I'm going to be checking IDs at Stammtisch. So if you guys want to come have a beer at Stammtisch for Oktoberfest.
Dirndl?
Dirndl?
A dirndl. It's the German, like, hi, yeah, good. You know, like the little, like,
The St. Pauli
creamy
girl.
milk maiden
Yes.
dress
All
with
right.
a little apron, and it's got embroidery of Edelweiss and such on it.
Beautiful.
Yes.
And those of us who are visiting Portland, tell them where Stammtisch.
Stammtisch is on the corner of Northeast 28th and Flanders. It is my favorite neighborhood, Bierstube. And there are Oktoberfests happening all over the country and all over the state of Oregon, of course, anywhere that has a German-American community. It's like Cinco de Mayo and St. Patrick's Day, but with pretzels. So it's great.
Can't wait. How about you, Tova?
Yeah, so we had a hurricane this last weekend, and 4 Waffle Houses closed.
Oh, my God.
This is a
right.
big deal because Waffle House, which is a beloved Southern kind of 24/7 diner chain that famously stays open 365 days a year, does not close except for in dire emergencies. I think during Hurricane Matthew last year, a whole swath of like I-95, every single Waffle House along it was closed. And that was when people knew things are getting real. We have to get out of here. And so FEMA actually has an official, unofficial Waffle House index where they can basically tell the physical impact, but also the economic impact of a storm on the area, because Waffle Houses are pretty much only in the South, only in like hurricane-ridden areas. If Waffle Houses have closed and how many of them have closed will tell you how bad this storm actually was, which is pretty amazing. I mean, people talk about the post office rain or shine, but Waffle House definitely has them beat.
It's a Cat 4 hurricane.
Yeah, exactly.
Cat 4 has a whole new meaning.
Yeah. But I was really impressed. Apparently, because this is such a frequent problem, they have like their own distribution centers. They'll occasionally drop lift in supplies. I don't know why they decided that it was so important to stay open. But I worked at a restaurant once that stayed open after Hurricane Sandy in Brooklyn. And we were the only place open, and we were flooded with people. And I guess, when things are getting bad, you just want a hot meal and some waffles and eggs.
The flood after the flood.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that is fascinating. Thank you. Virginia, what did you bring for us?
Well, I have a future dessert item that I'm looking forward to in the first weekend of October here in Portland. The Culinary Breeding Network, which I think I've mentioned before. It's a collective of kind of traditional plant breeders who geek out with chefs and breed the most flavorful versions of different crops, often forgotten varieties. And then the chefs put together these amazing meals with them that everyone can come and taste. And so it's this big event that happens every year. I think this is probably the 5th or 6th year now. And they have their annual variety showcase October 2nd here in Portland. If you are around and you want to try mouth-watering habanero gelato or tromboncino squash lollipops, that is the place to be.
I went a couple years ago, and it is such a good time.
It's so
such a
fun.
great chance to talk to members of not just the culinary community, but talking to farmers from all over the West. It's really, really
It is
cool.
a really fun event. And Lane Selman puts that together every year, and she deserves a huge shout out because she is really bringing together these amazing partnerships. And it is so fun to watch farmers and chefs come together and show off their wares in a way that you've never seen. So highly recommend it.
Yay for plant diversity.
Yay.
Yeah. Well, a special thanks to all of you panelists. I think you guys are the brain bank in terms of knowledge about seed banks. Virginia Gewin, Tove Danovich, and Heather Arndt Anderson. I really appreciate your taking the time. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Today's episode was recorded in the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, in the studios of OPB. You can read all about us on the OPB website. Our producer is Alex Ward. Special thanks to OPB sound supervisor Stephen Cray, and our theme music was performed by the incomparable wine importer Kermit Lynch. If you like our James Beard Award-winning show, please help us out. Rate us on iTunes, subscribe to The Four Top on your favorite podcast app, and please tell your friends about us. You can tweet us at @4top, all one word, or visit our Facebook page and post your thoughts about the show. We would love to hear from you. Bye-bye.
Nuit blanche, nuit blanche, nuit blanche.